Greetings, metalheads. Welcome to another edition of the Friday 13th YouTube channel. I hope you're well. Today you're going to be watching an interview with a band called Bloodlust, who released an album back in 1986 on Metal Blade Records. This album was entitled Guilty as Sin. It's a fantastic power thrash album. Now, if you haven't got the album, you really need to check it out. So the band, after this album, released an EP back in 1988 called Terminal Velocity, which was released on Wild Rag Records. Fantastic EP. So this interview is part one of two in two parts. This is done with guitarist Earl. Part two is done with the bass player Sandy. So please enjoy, listen to what the band have got to say and find out about the band's history. So thanks for watching, metalheads. Be safe and spread the word on Facebook and social media sites. Stay metal, metalheads. So folks, we're talking to Earl from the band Bloodlust, one of my favourite bands from back in the 80s. Welcome to Friday 13th.
Thanks, great for you guys to have me.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you some warm-up questions then first, El. So, as a guitar player, what age did you learn to play guitar, and was you musically influenced by anybody in the family? Was anybody that?
Well, with not really as musicians. There's a lot of music in my house when I was a kid, but what really got me wanting to play guitar was when I saw Black Sabbath in concert on ABC here in the States. When I saw like the power of Iommi's guitar playing and the sound, and saw the crowd, it was from the first Cal Jam show. That's kind of what made me want to pick it up and say, wow, that's amazing. So, I'm a big Iommi guy. So he was my biggest influence. I also loved Leslie West quite a bit from Mountain. And then everything else, anything that was kind of heavy coming from Europe, from the US, I loved all that stuff. So that was my primary influence, and I just kind of learned by listening and watching. I was more into like the rhythm playing, the big deep kind of detuned guitar sound. Even though I never learned how to detune my guitar, I just always tuned to standard. That's kind of why the Bloodlust record was in standard. But I always loved the sound. Anything that was heavy and sounded kind of dark and powerful, that was like my influence.
Oh, okay then. So was anybody in the family playing the instruments, or was it just you that picked the guitar
No,
up?
my mom would just sing and listen to music. My mom was from South America, so she played a lot of like cumbia and merengue stuff at the house. And then I inherited some albums from my aunts and stuff. So no musicians really. But we had this old Grundig stereo console that had tubes in it, and it was like had this great low end. So I was always into anything that kind of sounded really kind of earth moving, even from, old 45s of like the Kingsmen or the Beatles or any of that stuff. So I just kind of, once I saw in concert, that's what I wanted to do,
Okay then. Okay then. So can you remember the very first record you bought?
Gosh, I think the first record I actually bought was Black Sabbath, Master of Reality. That's, I used to walk to grade school with a buddy of mine, and he had this little cassette recorder that he would carry while we walked to school. And he was the guy that turned me on to metal and music and everything that was happening. We used to listen to Robin Trower, Zeppelin, and Sabbath. And Sabbath was the one that really grabbed me. So, after doing that, I was like, gosh, I must have been like 12 years old. That's when I went out and got that first album, and I think that's what it was. It was Master of Reality.
I can't actually remember my first rock album, but I remember being a big fan of the Police when I was a kid.
Oh yeah, Police was great. I saw the Police in concert. They played a really big show at Hollywood Park, which was a big, horse track, racing track in LA. It's not there anymore. They knocked it down. But it was the Police and the Fix, and that was a great show. I had no clue. I kind of just went because I had tickets, and it was fantastic. I loved the Fix was great. And in fact, I saw the Fix, I think just a few months ago out here in Milwaukee, and they were incredible. I was just, wow, these guys still sound fantastic. So,
What is it? Punk? Is it punk music? The Fix?
No, the Fix was more kind of like they were kind of more like that new wave. They were like one of the early MTV bands, really bass driven, vocal driven, and fantastic guitar player. So yeah, they were kind of more of a new wave band.
Oh, okay, interesting. Yeah. So, I mean, I can remember my first concert. I was 10 years old. It was a band called Blackfoot.
Oh man, great band. Yeah,
Yeah, I saw
Ricky
them.
Medlock.
Yeah, it was the Marauder tour.
Oh wow.
So
Well,
the support band was Samson, English band.
yeah, and did they have Bruce Dickinson?
No, Bruce had left. They had Big Mick on vocals.
Oh,
Bruce had
okay.
just gone to Iron Maiden. But yeah, I was about 10 and a half years old on that concert. That was my first show.
Oh, that's fantastic. I got to tell you, my very first concert was Black Sabbath on the Sabotage tour, and I remember it was on a Sunday night, the night before my first day of high school, and my dad took me there with my sister who was 11. I was 13. It just blew my mind, man. That was Sabbath. I just been getting into them, and then I finally saw them in person and changed my life. Because
Yeah,
Tony Iommi was kind of always my musical idol. I always
yeah.
tried to,
I never actually saw Black Sabbath with Ozzy. I only saw Heaven and Hell the band before Dio died.
Oh yeah, they were great too.
Yeah, yeah. I
Anything
wish
Iommi, I'm on board.
I wish I'd have seen Black Sabbath with Tony Martin. I was like, I like the Tony Martin Black Sabbath stuff.
Oh, that was great stuff too. I saw
Yeah,
that tour when Motorhead was opening for him, and that night that they played in LA, Lemmy got sick. So Sabbath just came out and played a little bit of a longer set, and it was tremendous.
wow.
I always loved Tony Martin. I don't think he gets a lot of props.
No, he doesn't. He's a great singer. I was actually interviewing Tony Martin this year. He's a really nice guy. But I've met him a couple of times, and he's real down to earth.
Yeah, he's a fantastic singer, and just yeah, he comes across as super cool, really humble, uh, just kind of grateful. And the new stuff that he came out with was like really impressive too.
Yeah,
I guess he
The
collaborated
Thorns
with an
album. The
yeah,
album.
he collaborated with an American guitar player, I guess, and it just sounds really good. Really,
Yeah.
I
Okay
hope to
then.
see him perform sometime.
Yeah, me too. So, the next question for you, El, is can you remember the first guitar you got, and do you still own it?
Ah, the first guitar I got was an SG copy. It said Crown at the top, and it had a Bigsby on it. And you know what? I don't know. It might be back in LA, buried in a closet somewhere. I don't know if I don't have it on me, but it was an SG copy, and it was
Wow.
a really cool guitar. And I tried to hot rod it with some DiMarzios and make it sound good. And after about 2 years, I realized, it's not a very good guitar, but it looks cool. So, you know, that was
Okay.
my first guitar was an SG copy
Okay
with
then.
Bigsby on it.
So my next question for you then, El, is what was the first band you was in before? Obviously before Bloodlust formed. What was your first one?
Well, I wasn't in that many bands. I tried to start a band called Shadow Fax back in the day, and we were more inspired by kind of like what was going on in LA at that time. Little more mainstream rock with like a hard edge.
Do you mean like the Doc and Rat sort of stuff?
Maybe, you got to go back to like more like the early Quiet Riot stuff, like with Randy Rhoads.
Yeah.
There was a band called Smile. There's also a band called Snow with Carlos Cavazo and his brother. They were a big influence. I loved Snow quite a bit, actually. Carlos Cavazo was a nice, loud, aggressive guitar player that had a really great stage presence. Anyway, the band that I had that band for a little while, and that didn't really pan out. I was very, very much a novice on the guitar. That my desire was better than my ability. But I played with some really great guys. So I kind of worked a little bit on stuff. I used to jam with a drummer friend of mine that I'd met locally, and that was probably about 81, 82, and that's where I developed most of my riff ideas and song ideas for the first Bloodlust album was back in 81, 82 with a drummer. Um, yeah, so basically I would jam with this guy a few times, quite a bit actually. And where I lived down the street one day, I just heard this guitar player playing really loud, just a few houses down the street. And the guy was great. And I was always, wow, what's this guy all about? Then I saw the guy riding on his Triumph down the block, and it turned out to be Anthony Romero. And the guy looked like he was like a miniature spitting image of KK Downing. He had this old Triumph bike and this blonde hair and these aviator glasses and, all the trappings, the leather jacket. And I said, wow, that guy's cool. So I just went up and knocked on his door. Uh, he said, hey, come on in, And so I told him, hey, I heard you jamming. You were great. He had a band, a backyard, like a cover band called Warlock. And that band had guy.
Yeah, I think I've heard one of the demos on YouTube, not to be confused with the German band.
Right. No, I don't know if they had any demos because I'm not sure if they had anything original. But they were doing like copies, like Iron Maiden, all the standards. Priest. They did a lot of Priest because Guy was very much a Rob Halford guy. So I played a couple of gigs with them in backyard parties, and I decided, hey, I don't want to do covers. I don't play covers very well anyway. And I had all these ideas. And so I decided to ask, Guy, hey, I mean, not Guy, actually, Anthony. Well, hey, you want to, break off with me and help me write out these songs and start a new band. And that's what happened. And it kind of morphed over time. What happened? We had the bass player that was in that band at that time. He wasn't quite the style of bass player I wanted. And we kept Mark Cuestas on the drums, who was an animal. He was just a monster. And Guy always kind of had his own ideas. He kind of wanted to do his own thing. So we kind of broke off from there. And then with an ad in the paper, I found Sandy, who had a rehearsal place. And then I put up an ad at a local music store, and that's when we found Steve Gaines. And I went to go see Steve was playing on a weeknight at the Troubadour, and he just knocked my socks off. He reminded me of a kind of like a Paul Di'Anno, kind of raw, young, killer singer, Just, that's the guy. So that's how Bloodlust came together. So it was kind of a a quick pathway to forming Bloodlust. And I
So,
didn't have a whole lot of bands prior.
all right then. So the first lineup of Bloodlust was actually Steve Gaines on vocals. Then he left, then he came back. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. Yeah.
Oh, okay, interesting. I didn't know that because me and Steve are good friends on Facebook. I have a photo of Judas Priest that I took live myself personally, and he thinks it's one of the best photos he's ever seen. I just managed to catch KK Downing and Glenn Tipton together. I was right at the front of the stage to my camera, and Glenn Tipton's looking right at the camera, and Steve thinks that photo is probably one of the best photos he's ever seen.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I look at the photo myself and think, did I really take that photo?
Cool. Yeah, man. I heard KK Downing is a pretty cool guy.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he is. All right, that's interesting to know. So, as we all know, Bloodlust, was that the first name that you had after Warlord?
Uh, no,
Was it Warlord, Warlock?
Yeah, but that was a completely different band. Bloodlust, I kind of broke it away. I kind of got Anthony with me first, and I kind of got Mark to come, and then eventually, after all, a little bit of drama and stuff, Guy kind of returned to that fold. But no, the band that at one time we considered calling ourselves Thulsa Doom after the character in Conan the Barbarian.
Okay, interesting.
That
Well,
was
why?
the name. And then we were actually, I was coming up with these ideas that maybe you should come out in animal skins and because Conan the Barbarian came out with Arnold, and that was like the most heavy metal movie of all time. So we were, let's kind of, emulate that. And then we saw Omen. We actually played with Omen, and
I love Omen. Omen,
and
one of my
Omen
favorite bands.
Oh, those are cool guys. Fell out of touch with them a long time ago, but we played a show or two with them, and but they were all about that imagery. So they kind of beat us to the punch, and so I remember seeing a horror movie called Last House on the Left.
Yeah, I've seen.
Never seen that. It's a classic. But anyway, there's a scene that's kind of easy to miss, but right towards the beginning, they asked the girls, where are they going? They're going to go see a local band. Oh, what's the name of the band? They go, oh, Bloodlust. And so I remembered that, and that's when we had a short list of names, and then we mentioned Bloodlust, and I think everybody agreed upon it at that time. So we had a few beers in the studio. This is kind of a funny story connected to that. We walked down the block, and we were all in our metal trappings back then. We used to just like wearing our stuff all the time, walking around the streets and being cool. So we went into into this liquor store down the street from the rehearsal studio. So there's this guy in there. He's a little inebriated. He goes, "Hey, are you guys in a band?" And then we said, "Well, yeah." Where you're getting, reaching to get in, getting the beer and stuff in the beer cooler. Guy goes, "What's the name of the band?" So we had just decided. So the guys kind of look at me. I remember Sandy looking at me, and I said, "Well, Bloodlust." That's what I told the guy. And the guy goes, "What? Butt crust?" And I'm like, so that was the first reaction from the first person that ever heard the name of the band. So we're kind of lovingly known as Butt Crust.
I'm looking forward to speaking to Sandy on Facebook. I'm going to say, Butt Crust, how are you doing?
Yeah. I hope he remembers that, but I remember that clear as day. That was the first time I ever mentioned the name of the band to anybody. And the guy said, "What? Butt Crust?" So anyway, there you go.
It's kind of interesting because, I mean, you guys changed your name. Well, sorry, should I say, there was a band in New Jersey called Bloodlust, but they changed the name to Blood Feast, didn't they?
Yeah, and you know what they did? I think there's a few stories that were going around there. I think there was some little bad blood coming from them, understandably. But what happened was that our management at the time, I think they had some kind of copyright or some kind of rights on the name. So when they found out about that, they sent them a cease and desist letter because we were already signed to a Metal Blade and we were coming out with that album. So that's kind of what happened. It was, we kind of really were unaware of that. But later on, I found out, that was the story. They changed their name to Blood Feast, I think.
Yeah, they did. Yeah,
they went on to bigger and better things. So
yeah, I know Adam. Adam's a friend of mine. I actually saw them in Germany a couple of years ago for the first time. So
yeah, see, they're still playing and stuff.
Yeah,
so it's good for them.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk about the first album, Guilty as Sin. For me personally, it's in my top 10 power thrash albums of all time.
Thanks, man. I saw your review and it was just like made me grin from ear to ear.
Thank you. No, I remember buying this record when I was like 15, nearly 16 years old. And I think one of your songs actually got played on the BBC, a show called The Friday Rock Show with Tommy Vance.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and Tommy Vance was like the godfather of heavy metal in the UK. He worked for the BBC. Every Friday night he'd play mainstream, but he'd play a lot of underground bands. He was not scared to play underground music. And I'm pretty sure he played Chainsaw.
Awesome.
Or one of those songs, and I was like, wow, this band sound awesome. And then when I saw your LP cover in the local record store next day, I was in like 15, 16, and I saw this album cover, I thought, interesting, looks pretty cool. Turned the back of the LP cover over, and I saw this guitarist with a BC Rich Ironbird. Was that you? Was that you?
That was me.
And I just thought, like, this guy looks cool as fuck.
Oh, man.
I was just like, yeah, but I was only 16, 15 years old, and I was like, wow, this guitarist looks cool. He's got a BC Rich Ironbird, and I've always wanted one of those.
Yeah.
And then I looked at the rest of the band, I thought, I'm going to buy this record, and I got it home, and I was like, wow, fucking awesome.
I got a cool deal on that. I little quick story without incriminating anybody too much. I'll just give you the soft story of it. Is that I got it from Gar Samuelson. We used to share rehearsal studio quite a bit with guys in Megadeth, and Gar was worked at the BC Rich factory, and there was a little bit, if I remember correctly, the story was that Dave Mustaine was trying to come up with the dough to buy this BC Rich, this one that I have, because he was a BC Rich player. He
was. That's right. Yeah,
he played a Mockingbird and a rich bitch. But he took he played it as a 6-string. But anyway, so I came up with the money first. So I ended up with the guitar, and it had all these little switches on it and stuff. And I just disconnected all the switches and had a Kaler on it. And that was a cool guitar.
Do you still own it? Do you still own it?
I've been trying to rack my brain. I don't know what happened. I sold a lot of my stuff off back in the day. I was going through a little rough period. And that was one of the things I sold. And I wish I had never sold that guitar because I haven't seen one like it since with all these little phase switches on it and stuff. Really cool guitar. I guess they're making them now. And they're asking thousands of dollars for them.
Yeah. So I mean, when
Paid a
Bloodlust
couple of $100.
when Bloodlust did the how many demos did you do before you got signed to Metal Blade?
You know what? This blows a lot of people's minds, and a lot of people don't believe me, but we didn't do any demos. We
Really?
played one show, and Brian Slagle was there and came up, shook my hand, said, "Let's do an album."
Wow.
Yeah. On this, that show is I think Sandy posted it on the YouTube. Our very first show at this little place that's kind of really famously known as a comedy club. But back in the day, in the early '80s, I think even late '70s, they would book bands in there, and it would get really loud. So it was funny because I remember the sound guy came up afterwards. You guys just set the decibel record in here, you know. But yeah, he Brian Slagle came up to me right after the show uh, and said, "Let's do an album." And I got to thank my friends from the band Bitch for that.
Oh yeah, I know Betsy and those guys. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Dave Caruth is still a very good friend of mine, and everything got fast tracked because I had a job back before Bloodlust. I was working for the phone company, and Dave Caruth's day job was he worked for this like a food vendor company, and he would replenish these machines, these vending machines. And so I would run into him on my break sometimes and notice, yeah, this guy, he's got all his hair tucked up into his hat. He tried to be all slick, but he had like a ton of, and I was all long hair. So we just got to talking, and I played him some demos, and I found out he was in this band Bitch. And I go, oh yeah, you guys are, pretty well known, and, very, very cool band, very even cooler people. They were just wonderful people. So he was really impressed by the demos that I played him, which were not really demos, to be honest. They were just like, recordings, cassette recordings I made with the drummer that I was mentioned earlier. And I said, I finally put a band together. Come and check it out. And he brought Brian, and the guys from Armored Saint were there. And, Betsy, Dave, a few other people. I think Chris Holmes was there, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway,
You'd have been drunk, wouldn't he? You'd have been drunk.
yeah, Chris. I have nothing bad to say about Chris Holmes, man. Chris Holmes is a cool guy. He would get up on stage and jam with me one time when I had another band after Bloodlust. He would come over my house, and we'd talk about Sabbath. He had Iommi stories. We both loved Leslie West and great guitar tone and all that stuff. But anyway, yeah, it's amazing he's still around, rocking and rolling, and I guess he's doing very well in Europe right now. So, he'd always come up to me and like pat me on the head like that because he's like what 6'6", and I'm like a foot shorter than that. So, but he was always a really cool cat.
Oh, excellent! So
One of my favorites too. I saw him play. One of his early bands was called Buster Savage, and I remember when I first saw Buster Savage, it was an amazing, kind of a life-changing thing for me. He came out, another guy that tucked all his hair he came out with like a painter's cap or a baseball cap, and he had these shades on, and he had like a painter's mask or a dust mask over his mouth. And he came out and he had this kind of an Explorer, and his guitar was so loud, man. And his band had all this gear. They started playing, and he just went like this, and hat flew off his head and his hair came down, and he threw the dust mask off, pulled off his glasses, and he was just this wild man. And it was just like, wow, that guy's like the greatest guitar player in the world. So Chris Holmes for me was always up there.
All right then. So
I'm happy to say I saw a lot of those guys early on. Saw Eddie Van Halen in Backyards. I saw Chris. I saw Carlos Cavazo with Snow, Randy Rhoads when he was with Quiet Riot. Yeah, some really good times, good memories back in the late 70s, early 80s.
So how long did it take to record Guilty as Sin, and was that the first title that you had for the album?
Yeah, I think it was the first title. You'd have to ask Sandy. Forget who came up with that. But it was kind of an interesting story because, we started recording the music on that, I believe, like in sometime in early or mid 84. Because like I said, in 83, end of 83, when Brian Slagle, let's do a record, we kind of just, oh man, and I think that's kind of when I look at it in hindsight, I wish we would have gotten a little more experience and tightened up a bit more as a band and gelled a little more. But we were all excited, full of piss and vinegar and all kinds of drugs and things like that. We wanted to go into, because we got offered a record deal like right away. Um, so we did a couple of gigs, uh, more with Steve. We did a really great gig with Slayer and a band called Beowulf.
Oh, I've
Uh,
heard of them.
it was a fantastic show, but the sad part of it was that Case Vessels was there from Roadrunner, and he had told us, "Yeah, I love the band, but I don't like the singer." And man, that's one of the biggest regrets I have is, we all kind of, we knew that, and we told Steve, and Steve decided to leave, and understandably, and so what happened was after that, we were without a singer for a while. We were trying out all these different guys, but we got into the studio. We got the studio time and laid down the instruments first. So all the music, you know, was recorded before any vocals were added on. So we tried a few different guys out. There was a great singer from Portland, Keith Flax, that we played with for a while, and he had to just go back home. Uh, we had Neil Turbin in the
Oh yeah,
studio.
Anthrax. Yeah,
Yeah, and but Neil, he had some muscle behind him. He was, you know, he needed to get something at that time. They wanted, to do something all around him completely. So that didn't pan out. He did record a demo with us that unfortunately I can't get my hands on. I don't know where it is. I tried contacting Neil, but he can't find it either. But I've remained good friends with Neil. And so it kind of came full circle back to asking Guy, well, let's do it, because we started recording the music, like I said, sometime in 84. And we finally finished recording with Guy. Guy came in, we got some lyrics together real quick. It was kind of all haphazard, the music was kind of there, but it was just kind of didn't happen quite as smoothly as I wish it would have. I wish we would have taken our time, developed more as a band, tightened up. But the end result was a fairly cool record. I mean, Guy came in, did the best he could at the time. We finished up. I think it was in sometime in third quarter of '85, and then the album was released beginning of '86.
yeah.
But it was a long, my long answers. It was a long period of time, from the moment we got into the studios to the moment of the release of the album. And I think
Yeah.
that kind of ultimately hurt us because we were, things were changing so fast, with the styles and the scene and everything. We were kind of just a fast heavy metal band that, played things occasionally fast, but then speed metal kind of came in and thrash. And so people kind of didn't know, at least the feeling I've gotten, where to kind of categorize us as a band. But I mean, I think the record is what it is, and it stands up to this day. And we were a really cool live act. I loved, playing live shows.
To me, it's a cult classic album.
Thanks, brother. That's really cool.
You
I
know,
got to get a lot of love for that album.
yeah. I mean, I look at the album cover. I was saying to Sandy, I said it looks like a padded cell.
That is so cool, man, because it was like we always thought, oh, it's the world's worst album cover. I don't know if Sandy told you what it's supposed to be. Did he?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he did.
It's supposed to be diamond plate chrome, and we could somehow, our management couldn't get the photographer to take a picture of it to do all. I guess it was all cut and paste back in the day. Couldn't have any digital stuff. So Metal Blade commissioned an artist to come up with that idea, and that's what you see. And it was just like not what we wanted. We had an alternate cover that actually came out on the cassette. That a guy had a friend that did it, and that was really nice, but it wasn't quite what we wanted. We were really kind of leaning more toward the that the diamond plate thing, and we were so unhappy with it. but Brian Slagle really wanted that album to be released. He was already rushing us in '85. So in '86, he kind of rushed in. We said, let's get a different cover and, you know, put it out in the second quarter. But he was already impatient, wanted it out there.
I mean, you did a really, really good job because you produced the album yourselves, didn't you? I was expecting Bill Matoya to be involved because he did a lot of Metal Blade albums.
Yeah, that's something I regret too. I regret not getting Bill. Bill's a really good friend of mine personally. I always admired everything he did, but we were kind of arrogant, to be honest, and confident in ourselves. Oh, we can do this, and the guys, and we were real close pals with the Megadeth guys, and they were working with they had their own manager, and working with Carrot Fay, who was an engineer at the time, really great guy, and they had done a deal. I think it was with Combat for their first album, and they were always they were down on the Metal Blade stuff, the early Metal Blade stuff. We kind of all were. We were always wanted to get a better sound, and consequently, we went with like the team that did Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good. But it was just not organized. It was kind of just pieced together over time. There are a lot of delays, the lack of a singer. If you listen to Ride to Death, the vocals come in right away. There's actually supposed to be a whole nother, bit of guitar work before the vocals come in, but we weren't thinking of that because we didn't have a vocal. We were just so inexperienced. But like I said, it was just the sound of that album was basically a live sound.
Sounds good though. Sounds good.
Yeah. It captures the energy of the live stuff pretty well.
So, what songs, Earl, on that album stand out for you? Wow, what are your favourite songs from the debut?
I think my personal favorite song is "Too Scared to Run."
I like that one as well.
And that song was Slagle's favorite song, by the way, too. At least that's what he told me. But "Too Scared to Run," I just loved doing that because it just had some really heavy things in it, and it sounds heavier than standard tuning, I think. And it just got a nice, kind of a marching kind of vibe. And I also love Chainsaw quite a bit.
Yeah, me too.
Chainsaw, believe it or not, I was really, when I came up with that, I was subconscious, Wasp was in my subconscious. If you listen to some of the early, like the first Wasp album, there's some of the stuff like big chords that Chris used to do. That's kind of, I think, inspired a little bit of Chainsaw. But yeah, all those tunes are great. Like Soldier of Fortune, Anthony, it's primarily Anthony's song. And it was just really a cool opening song. I added that little 12-string part at the beginning with a really broken down 12-string with buzzy strings. You can hear the strings buzzing on it. So anyway, yeah, I just have good memories of all the songs, but my personal favorite was always "Too Scared to Run."
Well, excellent. I mean, I like Ride to Death.
Oh yeah, thanks. Yeah, that's a good one too. Yeah, I got to play a really cool solo at the end of that one, and Mustaine told me, "Oh, that's my favorite solo on the album, dude." And I said, "Oh, cool."
My favourite song on the whole album, I think, is "Bleeding for You." I think that song just rips.
Yeah. It's got a real Iron Maiden kind of vibe. Then it goes into those gallops. Ant was the one that really had that galloping kind of vibe when he brought Anthony. When we started the band, he had a lot of these songs with these really great gallops in it, and it was great. He had already had a connection with Mark Cuestas, the drummer, who loved those kind of beats and stuff. That's another thing I wish Mark's drumming would have been brought out more in that album, because he did some crazy stuff on there. I mean, he's a great drummer, a fantastic drummer. I wish we could hear a little more of his double bass work and some of his tom work on there. But like I said, it is when I think back on it and just said, hey, yeah, this album pretty much captures what we were like. We had a couple friends of ours describe us as like a train that was about to go off the rails, but kind of never really did.
do you know the worst thing about the album is you just get into the album and it's finished.
Yeah, that was I remember reading a lot of the old press back in the day, and they would like mark us down for that. A lot of those clippings Sandy still has. Some of them are on that booklet that are on the vinyl, but we got pretty darn good reviews. Really actually surprisingly good, but they'd always knock a point or two off because of the length of it. And the song that I wanted to put on there that didn't make it because I got voted out was a song that we did on the EP, the song Terminal Velocity. And it would have been cool to do that because would have been the fastest song on the album. If you remember, that opening song, we did it as an instrumental. And, the guys thought it was a little too punk rock, but see, I was very influenced by a lot of punk rock and, early, Sex Pistols and Stooges and stuff like that. MC5, I love those bands. And Terminal Velocity was just something that I came up with that was, see, I'm going to write something really fast because everybody all around us seems to be doing fast stuff, so let's do something really fast. So that song would have been on there. So you would have gotten an extra, 3 or 4 minutes. So sorry about that.